Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing very well today. I'm going to look at some more music. We're going to keep going down the train. I got a whole assortment of albums that I want to talk about, I want to take a look at, and I want you to join me. So today we're actually going to take a look at Hepcat, Out of Nowhere. There's the front. I'll show you the back as well, just so you can get a good look. Maybe I should pose properly for a thumbnail. Terrific. So yeah, this is Hepcat's Out of Nowhere. This is actually a reissue, a remaster actually. It does say in the notes that they remastered this in 2003. This came out in 2004. It's a remaster reissue of their debut album that came out in 1993. So including obviously when the remaster was, it would have been the 10th year anniversary. They missed that. Cool thing too, so this remaster is on Hellcat Records run by Tim Armstrong from Rancid and Op Ivy, etc., etc. The '93 one came out on Moonska, which is the bucket from the Toaster. So that was his label. It moved over. Don't know the details behind that, but that's a pretty cool story, I think. So this is actually a really cool album. For people that don't know too much about the band, it has great liner notes. It's got like pictures of old show flyers, promo, details about the band, who's in it, how they even put their logo together. It's really cool. It's if you're into liner notes and learning the history of a band, this is definitely an album to pick up. So, who do you got in the band? So, for this first recording, you have Greg Lee, Alex Desert, Dustin Berry, Raul Oliveira, Dave Hilliard, David Fuentes, Dennis Wilson, and Greg Narvis. Some of those names might sound familiar if you're familiar with a lot of the ska and reggae from the early 90s into the 2000s in North America. That's because these guys they've been around. They've been in all kinds of bands. So Alex Desert actually you might recognize not just from music but from acting as well. He had a part in the show Becker, Ted Danson. He's got a role in The Flash. He's also a character in Boy Meets World and a slew of other things. He does a lot of voice acting now as well for video games. So if you look at shots of the band, you might think, hey, that guy looks familiar. There's why. In terms of artists and other musical acts that they're associated with, you've got the New York Ska Jazz Ensemble. A few of the members have performed with them. More recently as well with the Western Standard Time Ska Jazz Orchestra based out of California. A couple of these members have performed with that group. You also have the Rhythm Doctors, which is a group that would go on to partially become the Agrolites. A good chunk of them would form the Agrolites. Perhaps most notably, you have Dave Hilliard, who, of course, would be the sax player for the Slackers, as well as his own group, Dave Hilliard and the Rocksteady 7. And you hear that a lot here, especially, well, I'll get to the music generally, but you do hear a lot of that kind of early influence into that. The Slackers were just forming around this time as well. So broadly speaking, what does Hepcat sound like? Fantastic. They're a ska, rocksteady, kind of very jazzy group. If you're into groups like the Skatalites, as well as artists, a lot of Studio One artists, a lot of classic ska. So you've got like Delroy Wilson, Alton Ellis, Desmond Decker, a lot of that kind of vocal and soul and jazz inspired ska work and rocksteady and reggae. That's what you get here. This is just a fantastic album. I'll mention, by the way, you get two extra tracks, the last two there on this album, Nigel and Club Meditation, that you don't get on the '93 release. So that's another good reason to pick this copy of it up. Generally, it just sounds top notch. It sounds great. So the tracks on here, you got Dance With Me, which is one of their big hits. It's just classic. Every track on here is a classic. Every track on here just gets up, makes you want to dance. So try and think of different ways to describe it. But Dance With Me is one of their hits. The Secret's great. Hooligans, that one reminds me a lot of early Wailers stuff. If you've heard a lot of the Wailers work, Bob Marley and the Wailers, before they went in the reggae direction with a lot of the production. If you know the story of, how did they become famous? Well, it's because they started promoting and producing reggae artists as the same as rock bands at the time. So if you go before that and listen to that early Wailers stuff, it's more ska oriented, and that the song Hooligans really reminds me of that. You've got Ska Vez, which is a great instrumental. real Scatlightsy, even real Slackers Eve with the Slackers instrumentals. It's fun. Miscongeniality, that one's a bit smoother, a bit more laid back, but it's a good one too. Clarence Thomas is good. Prison of Love, a lot of people like that one. That one, it's good. They're all good. There's not a song on here I don't really like, but Prison of Love, it's a little not too laid back, but it kind of meanders a bit, which is good, but sometimes not as good, if you know what I mean. Earthquake and Fire, that picks you right back up, really, really upbeat, all for you. And Caravan or Scaravan is a great take on the classic tune. Policewoman, Same O is good. Train to Skaville, and that's from Dodd, so that's different than the other Train to Skaville track. Is a really cool way to, well, what would have finished the original album, and then your two bonus tracks, Nigel and Club Meditation. They're good. They're good. They're covers, and yeah, they're pretty good. I can see why maybe they decided to leave them off. They're not bad. They're just kind of, yeah, I get it. I get it. And even with those two bonus tracks, you're around an hour mark, which is pretty good for an album of this size, this quality. I think it, as a debut, really, really sets the band up for success. Um, Hepcat, they're kind of around at the beginning of third wave, playing more traditional ska, which, if you know about third wave ska, that's not kind of the sound that took over in North America. The North American sound really incorporated a lot more kind of American punk and pop punk and sort of poppy hooks. So think of, Real Big Fish and Goldfinger and Less Than Jake and Say Ferris and those kinds of groups, who are all great groups. Personally, I like all of it, but this is the style that didn't quite catch on, but it's fantastic. I think now we're seeing it. I think now, 2000s onwards, that new metal and pop punk kind of took over in the early 2000s, away from ska punk, and then maybe 5 or so years later, after those genres kind of went away, then you get this revival of groups doing that more traditional style of ska and rocksteady and reggae. Now we're actually maybe seeing a pop punk, a pop ska punk. It's all good. Ska punk revival. Um, the groups like the Interrupters and a lot of the stuff on Bad Time Records like Catbite. Um, but here it's traditional. If you're into traditional ska, traditional rocksteady and reggae, and you have not heard Hepcat, um, I don't know what you're doing if you haven't heard Hepcat, but check it out. I think it's a great album that deserves your listen. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, guys. I had a great time talking about music. Catch you soon.